many ways, Clarence Raby was just like everyone who lived in Raccoon Valley, an isolated and remote area at the junction of Union and Knox County, Tennessee. It was a place that was far removed from the city life of nearby Knoxville. In fact, you might say that the folks who inhabited this mountainous area were just as untamed as the wild animals that roamed it. And so it was that Clarence grew up a wild child, spending his days hunting and fishing, exploring caves, and the vast wilderness that was Raccoon Valley. His father was a typical farmer, while his mother was a homemaker who loved Clarence something fierce. As the youngest of her two boys, Clarence could do no wrong in her eyes. At time, he stole money out of the offering plate at church. Oh, that wasn't his fault. He was just trying to make change, she explained anytime anybody asked. And when Clarence was 15 and he snatched that woman's purse and ran, that wasn't his fault either. All of this was just because of the bad influence of his older brother, Joe. You see, his older brother was always in some sort of trouble, and young Clarence just happened to be with him when these petty crimes took place, the mother always contended. Truth be told, though, Clarence was following in Joe's shoes, step for step, and he would soon outgrow them and make a name for himself as one of the most notorious outlaws in the history of East Tennessee. Both of the boys spent more time in the woods with their dogs than they did at school, sometimes camping for weeks at a time without any supplies other than a gun. And while they weren't much on reading and arithmetic, they knew every tree, every herb, and animal track in the forest. And they were just as at home, alone in those hills, as all the other kids were on that recess playground. The old saying is that an idle mind is the devil's workshop, and that seemed to be the case for Clarence and Joe. Both of them soon dropped out of school and were involved in a series of juvenile crimes. First, it was stealing bikes and tools, and then breaking into homes while folks were at work. Yet, the first time Clarence had a brush with the law, it was when he was 15 and committed that purse snatching. But like so many first-time offenders, he was given a slap on the wrist with a 2-year suspended sentence. And the aspiring outlaw didn't pay much attention to the advice of the judge, who warned him to get his act together or else. By the time Clarence was 18, he had got his first car, and the two brothers began venturing into the Knoxville area, and they committed dozens of forgeries and break-ins, stealing anything of value and pawning it. Yet, the law couldn't seem to pin the crimes on either one of them. Now, while Joe, he was bold and took chances, Clarence was sneaky and patient. He would stake out a place for weeks, learning patterns, exactly what folks did, and when they came and went. He studied them just like he was tracking an animal in the forest, and he never got caught. Bolder and bolder the brothers became, and soon they were breaking into businesses. By 1955, Clarence was 25 and a professional thief with a spotless criminal record. He had become fearless and began committing a string of felonies. First, he robbed a gas station in Norris, Tennessee, and was arrested. Yet the tight-knit group of good people in Raccoon Valley came to his defense, and several of them testified, including his mama, during the trial that Clarence was at home during the time of the robbery, and he was acquitted. Emboldened, the two brothers went on a crime spree, first breaking into an elementary school cafeteria, stealing food, and then breaking into a home stealing 3 shotguns, a rifle, 11 boxes of ammo, and some jewelry. Later that night, they broke into a cabinet maker's shop and stole the safe. And as they loaded it into the car, police spotted the men and the chase was on. But I tell you, those Knoxville cops didn't know their way on the gravel and dirt back roads that Clarence took them on. And before long, the cops were so lost they couldn't find their way out of Raccoon Valley. The next day, Clarence's car was found abandoned, with that broken-in safe still in the car. The entire team of police and bloodhounds scoured the hills for 3 days, but there was no sign of the Raby boys. Yet the lawmen knew that the outlaws would eventually turn up at their mama's house for some of that good home cooking. So they waited for nearly a month when they finally arrested Clarence and Joe. The weapons weren't recovered, though. They had been hidden in caves for what Clarence would later say was future use. Just like that, both men were convicted of burglary and sentenced to 3 years in the Alcatraz of the South, Brushy Mountain Prison in Morgan County, Tennessee. Hey guys, JD here. Click the link below to check out my new book. It's full of stories just like the one you're listening to right now. Now, back to the story. Now, Brushy Mountain Prison was known as the end of the line and filled with some of the most notorious outlaws in American history, including James Earl Ray, the man who killed Martin Luther King. Years later, when Silence of the Lambs was filmed, Hannibal Lecter was on his way to Brushy Mountain when he escaped. Needless to say, Brushy Mountain was home to some of the most ruthless men, and now they were the Raby brothers' cellmates. Now, while the official purpose of prison, at least on paper, is that of a correctional facility, the reality was that places like Brushy Mountain were basically professional development courses, if you will, for up-and-coming criminals. Here, they learned the art of robbing, kidnapping, and murder. The prisoners of Brushy were forced into the back-breaking work in the coal mines for the state of Tennessee, and Clarence quickly learned that he didn't too much care for providing that free labor. The way the Raby boys carried themselves inside the prison walls earned the respect of the convicts. And before long, they agreed to an elaborate plan to help the brothers escape. Clarence and Joe worked in the kitchen at supper each night. After working in the coal mines all day, they knew that the final convoy of coal trucks left right after the drivers were fed, and that the truck carrying out the kitchen trash left at the same time. So, that night, as the convicts were putting all the trash in the trucks, they loaded one big bag of trash in the back of the coal truck that just happened to contain Joe, and another bag of trash in the dump truck that contained Clarence. Just like that, both men were carried out of the prison gates, and a couple miles down the road, they jumped out of the trucks and were on the run. Back at the prison, the guards realized the men had escaped, and the famous bloodhounds of Brushy Mountain were soon hot on the trail of the outlaws. By midnight, the hounds had picked up a strong scent of the brothers, and were so close that the desperados could see the flashlights of the guards through the trees. So, the brothers decided to split up. Now Clarence, he was a hell of a runner, and before long, he had outrun those dogs. By daybreak, there was no sign of him. Strangest of all, the guards couldn't figure out why the dogs had lost every possible scent of each man. But what they didn't know was that both of them had used turpentine from pine trees and rubbed it all over their shoes and their socks, making it so the dogs wouldn't track them. The remote mountains surrounding Brushy were brutal and home to every savage beast that still roamed the forest. Within a few days, Joe surrendered, and a few weeks later, Clarence did the same. Back to Brushy Mountain Prison they went, where they would remain this time until both were paroled after serving 2 years of their 3-year sentence. Back out on the streets, Brushy Mountain had made a believer of Joe, and he turned away from the life of crime. He was a reformed man. But Clarence, well, let's just say he hit the ground running. He was right back to his old ways and vowed to never go to prison again. By May of 1960, Clarence had spent nearly all of his 28 years on this planet committing crime. He had held a couple odd jobs as a well digger, but each payday they would roll around saw him spend his weeks earning searching for answers at the bottom of whiskey bottles. And by June, he was arrested again for drunk driving. which was a violation of his parole, and he was sentenced to 90 days in jail in Knoxville. But Clarence knew the ropes of the inside as well as the outside. He easily conned the guards into giving him a trustee position, which allowed him to go on work detail, picking up trash on the side of the road. And just 30 days into his sentence, Raby and another man named McCoy escaped again. And if the law had any question about how far Clarence would go to remain free, he was about to remove all doubt. The first thing the man did was break in a house, stealing a shotgun and a Pontiac to try and quickly get out of Knoxville. But by the time they reached the small community of Andersonville, the car was nearly out of gas. So they stopped at a gas station to fill it up. Once the car was full, McCoy called out to Raby,
"Hurry up, let's go. Let's get out of here."
But Clarence looked towards the store and he said, "I'll be right back." Now, I really believe that this was the moment that Clarence Raby passed the point of no return in his outlaw career. I firmly believe that he knew he was going to kill the person running that store. Clarence reached into the back of the car and walked slowly across the parking lot with a 12-gauge pump shotgun. Inside the store, the owner, Keith Frank, saw him coming and ran for the back of the store. But Raby shot through the glass window, killing him dead, before calmly stepping over his body and emptying the cash register of $1,000. In this moment, a killer was born. Authorities quickly pieced together the escape of the two men, the stolen car, and then the murder, and they knew Raby and McCoy were likely the killers, and the FBI immediately issued warrants for the arrest of the highwaymen. By morning, the cops found the stolen car had been burned on the side of the road in Raccoon Valley, but there were no signs of the criminals, who had stolen another car and escaped to North Carolina. Once there, the two men split up, but Clarence kept all the money, except for $20 that he gave to McCoy for a bus ticket to Chicago. From this moment on, it was every man for himself, and neither man would be heard from again for a solid month. Every law agency in East Tennessee was looking for Clarence. They suspected that the mama's boy would eventually make his way back home, but the outlaw was traveling in stolen cars that he would only keep for a couple of days before ditching them and stealing another. He spent his nights sleeping in the mountains before eventually making his way back to Union County, Tennessee, where on August 1st, he promptly held an entire family hostage in their own home, while he robbed them of $135, a .357 Magnum, 2 shotguns, and their Buick. The next day, Clarence was traveling down Highway 61, just past Big Ridge State Park, when he was spotted by an off-duty Union County deputy, who quickly spun his car around and gave chase to the wanted man for 3 miles down the twisting mountain roads at speeds nearing 100 miles an hour. Clarence managed to pull away from the lawman, but the felon lost control of his car and wrecked, blocking the entire road. As soon as Raby freed himself from the wreckage, he saw an old man sitting in a rocking chair on his porch across the street.
"Son, do you need a chain?"
The stranger asked. "Why, that's mighty nice of you to offer." "I sure do," Raby replied. But as the elderly man unlocked his shed to fetch the chain, he felt the whole barrel of that .357 Magnum pressed against the back of his head. "Give me your keys to the truck, old man." And with that, he forced the frail old man into the vehicle with him. As Raby drove back up the driveway towards the road in the wreckage, he made eye contact with the deputy who was standing in the road. No sooner than the patrolman saw the wanted man, he pulled his service weapon and opened fire, blasting 3 holes in the stolen truck. But as Raby sped off, he fired 3 shots of his own, hitting the deputy in the face, leaving him dead in the middle of the highway. A few miles down the road, the cop killer released the elderly man unharmed and he disappeared. Yet, he knew he had to get rid of the truck. So a few miles later, he pulled into a bar on the side of the road, where a man and a woman were getting in their car to leave. Raby parked his truck next to him and simply walked over and got in the back seat of the car and told the husband to start driving. But his wife began to scream.
"Get the hell out of this car."
And for that, she was rewarded with a good pistol whipping. Within a few minutes, Clarence Raby forced the man to stop the car where he left the married couple on the side of the road and set out again. Bound for the remote hills that he had grown up in, that he knew like the back of his hand, Raccoon Valley. And he had his mind set on one final showdown with any man that was brave enough to try and stop him. News of the robberies and the double murder shocked the nation, with the story running on the front page of newspapers as far as New York City and Los Angeles. The FBI promptly placed the thug at the top of their 10 most wanted list and sent an army of agents to East Tennessee to hunt the killer down. Clarence Raby was now public enemy number 1. 4 police agencies, including the Tennessee Highway Patrol, the TBI, and the FBI, scoured the mountains and the cave systems of Raccoon Valley, complete with bloodhounds and helicopters. Roadblocks were set up all over, but there was no sign of Raby. And the law was confident that the hill folks of the area were helping to hide the outlaw, who offered no assistance to the lawmen whatsoever, because in their eyes, they had zero trust in any cop. And it was also apparent that in many ways, the authorities had no intention of taking the murderer alive. Their eyes were set on seeking revenge, an eye for an eye. Just days after the search commenced, a father and son team from nearby Oak Ridge joined the search when members of the Knox County Sheriff's Department, in an apparent case of mistaken identity, opened fire on both men, shooting the son 3 times, killing him dead, and shooting the father twice, inflicting life-threatening injuries. That's when the good old boy club of Southern cops reared its ugly head. Several deputies concocted an outright lie and said that the father and the son had opened fire on them first. Yet, members of other law agencies had witnessed the shooting and reported otherwise. Just like that, in the middle of the largest manhunt in Tennessee, the cops themselves were now under investigation by the FBI. For 3 solid weeks, Raby eluded 100 cops and bloodhounds, and I don't believe they ever would have caught him. But he finally just got tired of hiding. And while the law was scattered across the mountains, Clarence simply walked home, unnoticed, where he showered up and his mama cooked him a hot meal, and he turned himself in. Now, cops were aware of his prior prison escape at Brushy Mountain Prison, and they were scared to leave him in jail in Clinton, so they took him to Knoxville to await trial, where he was facing death by the electric chair. The entire month that Clarence was in jail, his sweet mama would bring him a home-cooked meal every day. It began to look like old Clarence was content to face the music of his crimes, and he began to admit to a series of unsolved murders and armed robberies that the law had been unable to solve. Then, on October 24th, 1960, after being in jail for 4 weeks, Raby summoned the jailer once again. It seems he had another crime that he was prepared to confess. So, a group of cops quickly took the criminal to the interrogation room to record his confession. And when they were done, they took him back to his cell on the 4th floor. Yet, when they opened the cell to put Raby back in, Clarence pulled out a .357 Magnum from his pants and took all 4 cops hostage. I'm not going to the electric chair for nobody, and I'll put a hole in the back of your heads if I need to, boys, but I'll be leaving this jail now. It turns out that his sweet little mama had been bringing Clarence a little more than cornbread that day. Clarence forced all 4 men on the elevator, where he demanded the keys to the police cruiser and took their sidearms. The slippery bandit had done it again, and he was just about to walk out of the jail. Yet, when the elevator door opened on the 1st floor, the entire hallway was full of 30 cops. You see, it was 10 p.m. and shift change, but the outlaw was undaunted. He quickly took a deputy hostage with a gun to his head and began firing hot lead into the crowd of cops in the narrow hall. Chaos broke out. Men ducked for cover, hiding in closets. It turns out that during this time, the protocol for shift change was that all cops could couldn't be armed, so the law officers didn't even have a gun to defend themselves. Clarence continued down the hall, nearing the exit, where freedom awaited on the other side of the door. Just then, he passed the dispatcher's office and fired a bullet through the glass window. Inside, a cop had a sidearm, and he raised it to try to stop the escape attempt. But Clarence shot him first, hitting the deputy twice in the stomach. And as the officer fell to the ground, he emptied his revolver, shooting Clarence 3 times in the back, just as he reached the exit. Severely wounded, Clarence pushed the door open and ran for freedom when he collapsed on a courthouse lawn, dead. Oh yeah, you remember the story about the cops shooting the unarmed man and then saying that they were shot on first? Well, it turns out that they had all lied, and the men sued the sheriff of Knox County for $200,000 each and won. Let me know what you think about Clarence's story in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories from Appalachia's past.